Step into the world of Paranormal M, where the extraordinary becomes reality. Prepare to be immersed in a collection of thought-provoking and chilling stories. They'll leave you questioning the supernatural. Make sure to hit that like button, would you? The unexpected ritual. In the heart of the 1970s Singapore, where my childhood unfolded, our house stood just a stone's throw away from the Christian cemetery. The mornings were shrouded in an eerie tranquility, and yet this proximity never discouraged my early excursions with my father. Together we sought solace in the cemetery's embrace, a haven adorned with trees and an oasis of peace. It was during those pre-dawn hours when solitude reigned supreme that the cemetery truly revealed its mysteries. The darkness within those cemetery grounds held no fear for me. Instead, it became a canvas for my childhood adventures. Amongst the tombstones, hide and seek echoed countless times, an innocent game amidst the resting souls. However, even in this familiar terrain, there existed a place I dare not approach. A hidden village nestled deep within the cemetery's bosom. Cloaked beneath a dense canopy of trees, it perpetually shrouded itself in an inexplicable mist. Legends whispered of traditional Malays dwelling in this clandestine hamlet, living without electricity or gas, relying mostly on wood for cooking and oil lamps for light. It was a stark contrast in the modern cityscape of Singapore. Fueled by curiosity, I embarked on a daring adventure, pedaling towards the mystery veiled within that hidden village. As I approached the village entrance, an unexpected mist greeted me. An odd occurrence in the typically hot Singapore midday. With courage, I pushed through the chilling fog, reducing visibility to a mere haze. Deeper into the village, darkness enveloped me, revealing shacks and huts crafted from primitive materials. Some lacked doors, heightening the sense of the uncanny. The mist thickened, forcing me to dismount and proceed on foot, pushing my bicycle through the haunting atmosphere. Amidst the gloom, one hut emitted a warm glow, its candlelight beckoning me. Drawn to the light, I pressed forward, and as I did, the weather shifted. A sudden drizzle transformed into a torrential downpour. Wiping my eyes, I found myself standing before this hut, as if it had materialized out of thin air. Smoke billowed from burning candles inside, creating an illusion of fire. Stepping forward, my entire being was inexplicably pulled into the hut. The smoke dissipated, revealing a ritual in progress. Villagers adorned in tribal costumes with unnaturally elongated tongues chanted in an unfamiliar language. Glass bottles littered the scene, containing deformed baby fetuses suspended in cloudy ethanol alongside entrails. Panic set in, and as I attempted to flee, my legs felt rooted to the ground. A warm liquid trickled down my legs, and horror consumed me. The chanting crescendoed, blurring my vision. A boy my age appeared, raising his arm, yet I felt nothing. Vision fading to black, the echoes of the chant lingered in my ears. Gradually regaining consciousness, I found myself back home, safe in my bed. Overwhelmed with relief, I embraced my parents, tears streaming down my face. Despite the bizarre encounter, I never questioned my parents about my rescue. I simply wished to erase the event from memory. Years passed in silence, until one day, returning to the cemetery with my father, I saw the boy again. Strobe lights flashed, recalling the horrifying images imprinted in my mind. Panic seized me and I called out to my father. His gaze met the boy's, a little older now, but the familiarity struck me. They exchanged waves and I questioned my father about the boy. Nonchalantly, my father revealed that the boy had fallen off of his bike years ago, and he had found and carried him back to the village. That revelation sent shivers down my spine as the insignificant event resurfaced, the haunting implications. Did I live in a haunted house? So, in 2019, I moved into a rented house with a friend. After a while, we started noticing things. One night, I clearly remember hearing footsteps coming up the stairs and into my room. At 3 a.m, I didn't turn around to see if anything was there. At one point, I mentioned to my friend/housemate, and he had heard similar things, but he was skeptical and didn't believe in ghosts, but definitely felt something was going on. One thing I realized after a while was that the walls were very thin, and I could hear my neighbors moving around next door. There were other things. The weirdest one was we were both sat on different sofas watching TV. Suddenly, there was a banging vibration that me and my friend felt and I heard. My friend thought it was my cat, but then I pointed out that he was sat on my lap. In the end, it just became a running joke. Ugh, that'll be the ghost. A regular thing was 4 bangs. The weirdest thing is that I went away for the weekend with my boyfriend and we stopped off in a shut retail, completely deserted in the city, 50 miles from where we lived. My partner was half asleep and suddenly there was 4 bangs on the side of the car. We immediately looked around, then got out of the car. No one was around or in the area, and it was open space. So we basically were able to run and hide. Anyway, after 2 years, my friend moved out and my partner moved. We had a few more instances where bangs were usually when the other half was drifting off. We moved unrelatedly 6 months after. Nothing followed. Just wondering what people think. Possible ghost in the form of my girlfriend. So I am a bit of a skeptic. I don't really believe in ghosts. I've never seen one in my life until Sunday just passed. I was staying in the municipal hotel in Liverpool, and my girlfriend and I were getting ready to go out for a meal. My girlfriend was trying to take a picture in the mirror, but the lighting in the room was poor, so I suggested to her to try and find a mirror in the hallway. A few seconds pass and I hear the door open and look around and see the back of her going out of our room and to the left. The door takes about 10 seconds to close, so I catch it before it locks her out. I look down the hallway, both ways, but I can't seem to see her. I assume she had went around the corner, so I closed the door, thought I'll just wait for her to knock again and let her in. Anyway, I'm on my phone for 1 or 2 minutes, and then next minute my girlfriend just walks out of the bathroom in her hotel room. I'm completely confused. I assumed the front door was unlocked and I didn't hear her come in, but she promises me for 20 minutes straight that she didn't even step foot in the hallway. Plus, I tried it myself, and like all hotel room doors, it's locked from the outside. And we only got given 1 room key, which was in the power port inside the room. I was trying to think of any way this could be explained. First, I thought maybe I'd seen her get into the bathroom through the mirror, got confused. But I think this is just me trying to rationalize, as I definitely don't know what I saw. Also, the strange thing was, about 10 minutes after it happened, my memory of it was already starting to blur, as if it was a dream of some sort. but it did actually happen, as far as I'm aware. I just wondered if anyone else has seen something in the form of someone they know, and also if they have also experienced this almost instant fuzziness around the memory of that same situation. Chapstick. This actually started back in February of this year. I live in a 2-story house, 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. I've lived here since early 2017. It's just me and my 2 dogs living here. I've always heard noises throughout the house. Nothing ever bothers or harms me. Usually knocking on doors, footsteps running in the attic, or a ball of some sort bouncing. Faster and faster, as if the ball was dropped and bounced till it stopped. The ball bouncing was almost routine. Every 3 days in the evenings at different times, but always every 3 days. I can never pinpoint where the bouncing comes from. Still happens, though. Well, one evening in early February, I came home. Dogs greeted me as usual, went to the living room, sat on the couch to watch TV. I heard the ball bouncing again. I ignored it as it's normal to me now. Only this time I heard the ball bounce again, exactly as before. Never heard it twice in a row like that. I brushed it off. The dogs were also used to it. They remained asleep on the couch. I got up to get a soda out of the fridge. I go back to the couch and there's a chapstick exactly where I was sitting. Didn't ever remember buying any chapstick. Anyway, I put it on the table and continue on with my night. Watched a few episodes of The Walking Dead and headed upstairs to bed. The dogs followed me. We get up to my bedroom and in the doorway I see the same exact chapstick sitting upright on the floor in the middle of the doorway. If I were to pull the door closed, the chapstick would be knocked over. I freaked out a little because I usually close my door, so that way the dogs don't tear my shit up. I picked it up, put it in my pocket. I went back downstairs to get the other chapstick off the table and it was gone. But then I was really freaked out and went back upstairs to go to the bedroom. I couldn't sleep for a bit, tossed and turned. I looked at the chapstick and it was a normal chapstick you'd find at any store. I sat it on my bedside table and tried to go to sleep and finally did. The next morning I woke up. The chapstick was still on the table next to me. I put it in the drawer of my nightstand and went downstairs to make a bowl of cereal. Still freaked out a little thinking about the night before. It was about 8:30 a.m. Made my cereal and went and sat on the couch. Of course, the chapstick is on the coffee table again. Freaking out again, I grabbed it and ran up to my bedroom, and of course it's not in my nightstand anymore. I had to work in about an hour, so I took a shower and got ready, keeping the chapstick in my view at all times. I decided to take it to work and threw it in the dumpster at work, went about my day. I didn't tell anybody what was going on, just kept on pushing. I get home at 7:30. Dogs didn't greet me this time. I walk in, they were upstairs barking. I ran up and they were standing at my bedroom door growling. They saw me and snapped out of it. I opened my bedroom door and my nightstand was knocked over. I picked it up and figured the dogs were playing while I was gone, but I always shut my bedroom door, so that couldn't have happened. I was still freaking out, so I decided to sleep in the living room. I kept my lights and TV on all night, dogs by my side. I awoke at 3:30 a.m. to hear my dogs upstairs growling again. As I'm heading upstairs, I heard the ball bouncing again somewhere downstairs. I ignored it and went to go see what my dogs were growling at. Didn't see anything. Everything looked normal. I calmed them down. Soon after, one of my dogs ran downstairs into the kitchen and started barking ferociously at the cabinet near the fridge. I opened the cabinet and lo and behold, the chapstick returned. I left it there, slammed the cabinet shut. Right then and there, I yelled, Whoever you are, I command you to go away or else. Still, even after that, I was never harmed, just freaked out. Shortly after that, I hear footsteps running. Mind you, my floors are all hardwood. I don't know where the running was, but it was downstairs this time. I heard the ball bouncing again, and I yelled, "Get out now!" It all stopped immediately. I was freaked out, but didn't hear a peep for a month or so. The ball bouncing started again, though. The chapstick disappeared without a trace. But to this day, I still hear the ball bouncing. The house has been put up for sale. But until it's sold, I'm staying here. But if anyone's interested, I tell them my story beforehand. I don't hear from the buyers again. I know you can hear me. This happened to me last year. Never in my life had I heard a voice so crystal clear. I was up late working on an art project in my living room, the windows wide open. I lived in the first-floor apartment. Very often I felt as if something or someone was watching me, and I knew that I knew, or it knew that I knew. I got the feeling that I wasn't supposed to know, if that makes sense. It felt like someone was directly outside my window staring straight at me, unwavering. It was probably about 1 or 2 in the morning when I heard what sounded like a very distant cry for help from a woman. This calling was so quiet it was just barely audible. That's how far away it sounded. But at the same time, I had this eerie feeling that it was actually quite close. It was so confusing I chalked it up to exhaustion and that it was probably all in my head. Just as the screaming stopped, I swear to God I heard a voice so clear, so close, so haunting whisper directly into my ear. I could almost feel their cold breath, and it said, "I know you can hear me." This voice, although only a whisper, echoed through the room so articulately. There's no mistaking that message whatsoever. Undeniable. And that thing was right. I could hear it. Every now and then I think about this. It chills me to the bone even a year later. This was like nothing I've ever experienced in my life. Even now I can't fully articulate the fear that shook me to my core because of this. The juxtaposition of it all, too. The distant screams were so quiet, but that was the loudest whisper I've ever heard in my life. There was nobody there. Haunted or infested? So I ended up in jail for 24 hours. At about hour 4, I was given a cellmate. This dude was Jamaican or Haitian. He was wearing the scrubs he was arrested in, but seemed a bit odd that we didn't talk much. But we seemed equally uncomfortable and equally antisocial, which was fine by me, because I was afraid I'd be celled with a murderer. At some point in the night, this guy kept getting attacked by a roach or several roaches, but one at a time. I protected him from the roaches a few times, and he seemed genuinely grateful. However, sometimes he started looking odd. When that happened, I started banging the cell and yelling about my rights. He stopped acting suspect when I did that at least twice. At some indifferentiated time, no windows, I was moved to another cell with no cellmate. This guy started screaming all night as if the roach or roaches attacked him without me to protect him. So we're both sent to the judge at the same time, so I get to hear the details of his crime. Motherfucker was charged with murder. He was a direct support worker. And this happened on the job. Key piece of information is the gun found on site did not match the one on his concealed carry license. So he could have been innocent, but who knows? But this is about those roaches. Was he under attack from the victim? I didn't have a single roach in my cell after moving. Also, his terrified screams make me wonder if he thought something other than a badly infested cell was the cause of this. Maybe he wasn't innocent. Can someone help me identify something I've been seeing? So, context. Ever since I was around 3-ish, I'm now 16, I've been seeing something that I've always called a witch. I'm pretty sure it's not that, but I do think it's something not usual. Since I was younger, I've always been able to see things until 4 years ago. But what I did see most often was a woman with long hair and no definable face. She had long fingers, she was skinny and pale too. I have 2 memories in particular about her. One was her reaching out of my old nursery room's doorway. All I could see was her arms. The second one was when I was really little. I kept seeing her in the dark, and I had a toy that would light up a small area, so I kept pressing it all night until the batteries died. The second one could most definitely be my imagination, but I don't understand why I'd imagine that. Now that leads me to last night. Like I said, the past 4 years I haven't seen anything. But now for some reason I've felt more connected to a spiritual side that I haven't in a while. And because of this, I've noticed a few things. One was the witch. I saw her in my bedroom last night, just next to my bed. Then I saw her crossing over to my bed. Next thing was seeing a rather tall ghost in the figure of a man standing over my friend. I didn't say anything, but I did find it very odd I'm seeing these things again now. Also, just additional info. The witch does not give me a good feeling to be around. I don't have any women family members that have recently died, and if it helps, I live in Maryland. Help. I'm either going crazy or my apartment is haunted. First, I thought it was a dream because my first week in the bedroom, I heard a female yell with surprise, "What are you doing here?" The next thing that happened is things will go missing for weeks at a time and pop up again in places I'm sure that I checked. Then I started seeing shadows dart across the corner of my vision. This week, she let out a scared scream at the foot of my bed like she was surprised with a gasp. I went back to bed, and then this thing slapped the foot of my bed so hard I felt the mattress dip next to my foot. I'll admit at this point I was more angry than surprised anymore, so I told her to cut that shit out. Big mistake, because before I wasn't sure I was being haunted because it always happened late at night, usually when I was almost always asleep, but yesterday she turned on this adult toy that I have. It's embarrassing, I know, but she turned it on, and I promise this isn't satire. I got up, turned it off, and even put the on button facing the ceiling in case maybe the button got pressed somehow. As soon as I sat it back down, she turned it back on, and at this point, I was a little scared. So I turned it back off, tried to go back to bed, and she turned it on again. I threw it away at 4 a.m. to the dumpster on the street. I then tried to go back to bed, and I could hear breathing next to my bed. I then got this overwhelming feeling I was being stared at until 6 a.m. when I finally had to get up and basically get out of my bed anyway. I know it's a she because I've heard her voice, and it's always been scared like I shouldn't be here. I live in an army barracks, and suicide is very common. My theory is some girl took her life in the room. She doesn't know that she's dead. I didn't believe in ghosts before, because I've been but I've been taken to talking to her gently before I do things now. I'll tell her I'm about to turn on some music or that she has a place to herself when I leave for work. I'm honestly hoping she just thinks I'm her roommate or something, because obviously this was her space. She isn't tracking that she's dead. She's never been violent or aggressive with me, but she has a habit of doing these things at the dead of night and terrifying me. I need advice on what to do with this because she's very real and she made me a believer, but I'd be lying if I said she doesn't scare me. Verbal encounter at Higgins Lake, Michigan. A few years ago, me and my mother-in-law took my sister and my sister-in-law's camping at South Higgins Lake Campground in Roscommon County. It's a beautiful campground surrounded by bright turquoise waters, with tiny twisted snail shells littering the white sand. We were set to stay a full week. The first few days went by great. Each night I would stay awake outside the tent until it was late enough for all the fires to be out and the campground being completely dark, trying to see the less light-polluted night sky. I include this detail because I didn't have any fear while alone in that dark at all. Well, I went into the tent to find my mother-in-law still awake on her phone scrolling Facebook. We both have trouble sleeping. I lay down next to my sister and I'd look at her sleeping face in the phone. The tent was illuminated by this phone. My name had said out loud, near my head, just outside the tent fabric, plain as day in a woman's voice. Abby. I ignored it mainly because I was like, there's no way I just heard that. Whatever. And then again, louder and sterner. Abigail. My mother-in-law immediately says, "Don't you hear that? Hello, hello." We both stayed quiet waiting for a response and nothing. One fact to know is it was so silent anyone who would have walked up to the tent would have been detected, and it sounded as close and as clear as someone kneeling on the ground, and speaking less than a foot from my head. We didn't feel, see, or hear anything again the rest of the trip. We both have had experiences with ghosts on our own time, so it wasn't too crazy. But the fact it could have said it while I was alone outside the tent still freaks me out to this day. If I were alone that day, I wouldn't expect anyone to believe me. Anyone else ever experience anything like that? Or have an idea as to what it could have been? Is there paranormal activity in my house? About a month or so ago, my dad went out for work. Me, my sister, and my mom. We were all downstairs and we heard a loud bang like someone had thrown something against the wall. I went upstairs to see nothing strange in any of the other rooms except mine. I have 4 Kirby figurine/toy things. I had moved and another had somehow ended up on the upper end of my bed. They were on a shelf by the lower part of my bed. I didn't think much of it in case it was wind, but when I looked down, and other things had fallen off my drawers and shelf as well. I checked my window, nothing. Checked my other window in the house. None were open. Still, I thought nothing of it. A couple of days later, me and my family were playing games downstairs when again I heard another extremely loud bang. I went straight to my room. I have this heavy book about space, etc., and was on my bed on the lower part, and the shelf was above the upper part. Started thinking that this was strange, but didn't think any further into it. After these incidents, I started becoming more aware of things, and realized I've been hearing footsteps in the hallway in the attic, and my parents' room for most of my life. So I probably got used to it and ignored it, basically. There's also a walk-in wardrobe in my parents' room, which has a very obnoxious squeak when the door opens. I've been hearing it open and close when no one's in that room. The door is also hard to open. The bathroom light will also turn on randomly while everyone's asleep. My dad's encountered a shadow on the stairs when my mom and sister were out, and nearly immediately after he told me he felt dizzy and the air had become thick. My dad'll believe something if there's no explanations. So once it had passed, I looked into it, couldn't find any real evidence because none of it aligned with our situation. The Black Fuzz. Hey guys, I wanted to tell this story that happened to me about 9 years ago that I still can't find an explanation to, or anything that could point me in any sort of direction. To me, this makes no sense to this day, but I post this in hopes that maybe one of you knows what this is, or maybe one of you had a similar experience. For context, I'm a 17-year-old female, and this happened to me in the state of Iowa. This particular town had a lot of history for paranormal experiences and homes that many couldn't spend a single night in because of the things that they would see and hear. I have always seen and heard things that non-believers would assume that I was making up or imagining. But luckily, my dad sees and hears them too, and he's always believed me. In this house, many things were wrong. Everyone knew this. Things would be thrown off the furniture, and you could hear someone falling down the stairs at night. The dining room chairs would be pushed around the kitchen, and so on. But what happened to me was not like the other activity going on in the house, which is why I still have no explanation. Okay, now, into the story. This happened to me every night in the large bedroom me and my little sister shared, who was 5 years old at that time. We slept in a king-sized bed together. She would always fall asleep first. I always laid there trying to fall asleep, and I'd stay as still as I could to relax, and eventually drift off. But every time I stayed still for an extended period of time, this little fuzz creature bug, I don't know, it would visit me. It looked like a teardrop, and it was black and fuzzy, and it moved very, very fast. It came up from under the covers and ran along my body, but the funny thing is, I couldn't feel it, just see it. Every time I moved, it would panic, dash back under the covers. I got upset because I didn't know what it was or where it came from. It never hurt me, and it never made noise. I remember the last time I saw it. Over time, it began to come back. I would move and it would leave, but if I stayed still again, it would come back again. I figured if I stayed still and waited for it to run along my hand, I could catch it. So, when I stayed still and opened my eye, and when I saw it running along my arm, I pinned it with my thumb and pointer finger and studied it. It was very soft and almost felt like it was really kind of holding nothing. It was so light, but it was squirming like crazy. It was going insane trying to get away. I had no idea what to do. So I let go and it went back under the covers, never came back. After we moved states, I told this to my dad, and he sat there very perplexed and asked me to draw the creature, I guess you could call it. A black teardrop-shaped, hairy but very wispy and 2 inches long. And to this day, neither of us have any idea what it is. So he asked me to investigate, so if any of you have any idea what this could be, let me know. I don't know, guys. For some reason, that scares me more than the ghosts. Maybe it's just because I have, well, pretty sure everybody would be terrified of a flying around black fuzzy thing in bed. Or it's just me. Grief makes you experience things. So this happened around 10 years ago when I was 15. My grandfather had passed away about 3 months prior, and my grandmother couldn't live in the house anymore on her own because of mobility issues. Now, important extra information. She told us several times that she'd see her husband laying in bed or standing in the bedroom at night after he passed. We always brushed this off a little bit. One of the last nights of us cleaning out the house, it was around 17:30, which is 5:30, by the way, guys, and getting dark outside. I was in my grandfather's old study, and the lights in the rest of the house were already off. I was getting some small things I wanted to keep, until out of nowhere I got these cold chills and a very strong feeling of being watched. I literally dropped everything and sprinted out of the house. My father said I was so pale it was like I'd seen a ghost. Grimacing face emoji. Then when I looked back at the study's window, I could swear I had seen the curtains to one side like somebody was holding them. My late father gave my mother his blessing when she remarried. Just a bit of background. My father passed in early 2015 from lung cancer. It understandably devastated us all. My mom worked through her grief and started dating again in 2016. After a few failed dates, she met my stepdad. They then went on to get engaged in 2017 and married in 2018. My stepdad's an incredible man who was very understanding and empathetic to my mom being a widower. Never made us kids feel like he was replacing our father. Truly grateful for him. On the morning of their wedding, my mom opened her closet to find a letter laying on the floor. The letter was written by my dad for one of his cousins a few weeks before he married my mom in 1993. This letter was over 20 years old. The letter talked about how he was excited to marry my mom, how much he loved her, how he couldn't wait to start a life with her. My mom has never seen this letter in her life. She had no idea it existed. Now, my mom is not materialistic and doesn't really hold sentimental attachments to items. She had moved twice by this time, had thrown out or gone through her belongings and tossed what she didn't want to bring with her. She would have known she had this letter, especially if it was being stored in her closet. Especially if it was being stored in her closet in the way that it could fall onto the floor on its own. I firmly believed that this was my dad telling my mom he approved of and was okay with her marrying my stepdad. Demonic activity. I wasn't too sure in which Reddit to ask about this. So if this isn't the most appropriate one, please drop a comment directing me. Thanks. At Paranormal M, you're in the right place for demons. Alright, so let me give you some background information. My fiancé and I are currently long distance and spend many hours on the phone, including sleep time. I'm there with her on the phone when she's sleeping, and vice versa. October 30th was when it all started. My fiancé began hearing her name whispered to her during her sleep, which caused her to wake up alarmed. Now, I would have probably dismissed it as something that happened on a dream or a nightmare if I hadn't heard some things but two, but before she woke up, I heard a voice speaking in the middle of the night to her at the end of the call. A voice that I did not recognize. It didn't belong to any of her family members or friends. Soon after, she mentions the whispered call. Initially, we dismissed it, but it's been consistent. Started with whispers, then hisses. Then she mentioned feeling cold touches, and for the last 3 days, she literally jumps awake with scratches on her arms. Fresh scratches, all done around 3 a.m. The first time it scratched her, she had 6 scratches on her arm, then another 3, and today another 3, all around the same area of the arm. They all happened during her sleep. It's impossible for her to have done them because I've been keeping an eye on that. She's literally sleeping when they take place. They jump her awake. It's worth mentioning that I also have a dream where I saw her, well, deceased, with this tall black figure looming over her. From previous experience as a Wiccan, I know that what I saw was a demon, and strongly believe that it may be the one taunting her during her sleep. Now, the complicated part. I recently learned that just before she was born, Her mother had a miscarriage, a boy. His name was then passed on to her, and she's been informed by a practitioner that there's a possessive figure that's been with her since she was born, and that figure believes that they deserve her place in this world and take over her when she's more vulnerable. Now that you have an overview of what's happening, let me ask the questions. Is it possible that the tall black figure I've seen on 2 separate occasions is her miscarried sibling? What can she or I do to stop this sort of activity? It was pretty manageable until the scratches started happening, and she's quite distressed over them and doesn't sleep anymore. Can their return be prevented once they're gone? Dreams sent from the beyond. I have a semi-interesting story. For as long as I can remember, I've always had extremely vivid dreams, to the point of not being able to tell my real life from my sleeping one. As I got older, some of these dreams started to become premonitions. Some have come true days, weeks, or even years later. For example, 2 years prior to moving into another province, I had a dream about myself sitting in a small shack, legs up on a desk, looking at a fence with a giant truck coming in. I was wearing a construction onesie, an all-blue jumper, high-vis straps, steel-toed boots, and a hard hat. I was 20 at the time of this dream, and in my club and super girly mode. No way in hell would you ever catch me in that outfit. Lo and behold, 2 years later I moved to Alberta, started working at a refinery. I'm sitting at the desk, feet up on truck. Or sitting at the desk, feet up, comma. A truck pulls in, and now my dream hits me like a slap in the face. Now, to start the real story, I have to preface it with this point in time. I really only dreamt of my childhood home, obviously my safe space, as I lived in 5 homes after this and never dreamt of any of them. This dream happened in Alberta in a house I had only lived in at the time for roughly 6 months. I lived with my boyfriend at the time and his younger brother. We also had 2 cats and a dog. We lived in a 3-floor townhouse. Bedrooms upstairs, stairway was in the kitchen. Back about 10 feet from the base of the stairs was the back door to our parking spot, then the living room entrance opposite the back door, but off to the side of the kitchen. So I go to bed, and the dream starts with my walking down the stairs into my kitchen. There's a pasta pot in the front burner of the stove, and it's on fire. I freak out because I have nothing to stop the fire, wake up from my dream. I walk out of my bedroom, look down the stairs, kitchen lights off, no lights at all coming from downstairs. So I go back to bed and fall asleep. At some point I fall back into the same dream. I'm walking down the stairs to my kitchen. The pasta pot is on the stove again, but now the entire stove, the wall behind it, are on fire. I feel the heat on my face. I panic trying to wake everyone up as my boyfriend's asleep upstairs. His brother is asleep in the basement. Trying to locate my animals, can't find anyone or anything. Wake up again. This time more frazzled. I walk out to the top of the stairs again, and all is still normal. I go to the bathroom, try to shake off the feeling of terror from that dream. I eventually fall back asleep, only to fall back into that dream for a 3rd time. Now this time, I'm walking down the stairs and I can see before the base of it that the entirety of my kitchen is on fire. Red-hot flames are licking the walls, black smoke everywhere. Hurts to breathe. It's hot as hell. Get into the kitchen to see the same pasta pot in the stove. A wall of fire is blocking the living room door entrance, and my dog's on the other side of it barking like crazy, and I can't get to him. As I hit the floor, the stairs behind me were also set ablaze with both of my cats at the top of the stairs hollering. I can't save anyone. I want to run to the open back door as it's the only safe route to go, but my brain is like, oxygen. Blow the house up, what do I do? I woke up, sweating buckets, crying my eyes out. I leave my room to go check out the kitchen. Now there's a light on. I freak out and run downstairs. Guess what I find? My stovetop is on with the pasta pot from the front burner. All of the water had boiled off and it started to turn red. My boyfriend's little brother came home drunk from the club, tried to make food, but passed out in his room. My mom thinks it was basically my great aunt protecting me, as she had just passed away earlier that year. Part of me thinks I also may have some natural abilities for this, as it happened in the past, but never that instantly. I always said I don't believe in ghosts, but then I remembered the ghost I saw. I have something I can't explain away. This was probably 5 years ago while I was driving down North Carolina for my great-aunt's funeral. I left after work in Pennsylvania and drove down I-81. At midnight, I was just getting to Tennessee. It was around the top of a mountain. I remember it was a full moon because I could see surprisingly well in a spot that's typically pitch black. As I started coming down the hill, I clearly saw a man riding a bicycle up the mountain on the left shoulder. I've biked on the interstate so much I'm not one to judge there, but he didn't have a front light, which seemed irresponsible to me, especially for someone biking against traffic. I looked in my rearview mirror as he passed to see if he at least had a backlight. He was completely gone. He hadn't crossed the road, wasn't on the other side of the median. Nothing. I looked back as I passed him, so I only lost sight for a moment. There weren't any exit ramps either. I've never checked whether a bicyclist was killed there once or anything because I barely knew where I was. I'm certain this part is a coincidence, but as soon as I got to the bottom of the mountain, I spent the rest of the night driving through a thick fog all the way to my destination. It was super spooky. Strange occurrence in Mesa, Arizona. Thoughts? Circling around the Mesa Community College Red Mountain campus, there's a nice little trail to follow. The area is a Sonoran desert. It's a nature preserve, and it's a nice walk to see the sunrise and watch all the animals coming and going. The trail curves near the intersection between McKillop's Road and Power Road. And there's a little grove of Palo Verde trees and cacti. I've walked past it many times, and often felt a little cold there, maybe a little uneasy, but I always chalked it up to being shadier and wetter, since the runoff from the monsoon seasons probably drained there. Not the only one who had felt it. My father-in-law walked the same trail a few weeks ago. I'd never mentioned that feeling, but he's confirmed that this particular stretch of trail has also made him feel off. Well, I walked the same trail today, and I was just warming up for a run. This was around 7:45 a.m. I happened to be wearing my Polar Beat heart rate monitor. I use this to track my target heart rate, and at the time I was also listening to a podcast on my headphones. I was having a nice morning, felt no particular stressors short of the usual, feeling fine. As I rounded the trail near the intersection between McKillop's Road and Power Road, I suddenly had a huge shift in my physiology. I've never had a panic attack before. I'd like to think I'm pretty level-headed. I've been an EMT and have a pretty good handle on my emotions. This was like nothing I'd ever felt before. In that same instant, the podcast I was listening to stopped without me pausing it. My heart started pounding in my chest so hard and sudden that I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. Together with this was a slight sense of nausea. I felt pressure weighing down on my head and chest, and everything felt so heavy and dark, and it seemed like my legs didn't want to walk as well. I also thought I heard whispering, but it was like it was in the periphery, barely perceptible. Anything felt like it was kind of vibrating. My vision changed a little too. It felt like the world was twisted just slightly off in that spot. I kept walking and the feeling followed for a while, but eventually subsided. You can see on my heart rate tracing where it is. It shot from 90 to 140 within seconds, just shy of the 30-minute mark. And even though I was trying to speed up, I actually slowed down slightly. Another odd detail was I noticed a bunch of trash piled in the middle of the trail, which looked like it was done by people. Not sure if that was significant at all. This is the first time I've ever had any kind of experience like this that I would remotely associate with the paranormal. Love to hear your thoughts on what may have happened. I know there are plenty of stories of strange things that happen out in the Sonoran Desert. I'm curious if anybody's ever heard of something similar. Whatever it is, seems to have a permanent residence out by these trees. Ask Reddit. When I was 11, my family moved to a very old house, built in the 1890s, I think. It was in a different state. The first night there, I didn't have many of my things unpacked yet. The TV wasn't hooked up, so I dragged out my keyboard and started to play. As I'm playing some terrible song I learned in music class, a chill goes down my neck. I look over to the window on the other side of the room and see my reflection. And an old woman is standing over me, her hands clasped in front of her. I booked it downstairs, screaming to my mom, but of course it was dismissed since I was a dumb kid. Over the 7 years I lived in that house, I saw her 3 more times. Once on the stairs, slowly descending and staring at me, and twice in the spare room catty-corner to mine, holding on a rack of clothes in the corner. Every single night I would hear the threshold creak, then footsteps going around my bed to the dressing room. It was, once again, an old house, so there was a tiny dressing room attached to the main room. And then back out. A few nights I woke up to a cold breath on my face. Come to find out, a woman died in that room in the 1960s of some sort of illness, but the room she usually stayed in was mine. I don't really believe in ghosts anymore, but damn if I can't explain the lady in that house. Ask Reddit. Mine is secondhand. My stepmom and my dad used to work opposite shift there for a while. He was on nights, her on days. They had a set of baby monitors from when my sister and I were babies. My dad said they could record short messages with them. They would leave them out on the coffee table for the other to hear when they got home from their shift. This went on for a bit. Then once their shifts lined up, they put the monitors away in storage. She died of cancer at a really young age. My dad had just gotten back from the funeral and was home alone. He spent that night going through their things, packing some of her stuff away. He said he had one of the baby monitors sitting out on the coffee table and it woke him up in the middle of the night. Woke him up with an old message going off on repeat that she had recorded. It said, "I love you, Mike. I love you, Mike," over and over. My dad told me he just sat on the couch in the dark and listened to her message until the batteries died. A couple of weeks later, he had picked us kids up for the weekend. After my sister and I went inside, he said he was sitting on the porch smoking, and a strong gust of wind blew. He said he could smell her perfume that she always wore. It scared me hearing those stories as a kid, but now I can see the beauty and peace in those experiences. Ask Reddit. Number 3. This is probably going to get lost. My family's always had these gifts. From dreams of the future to seeing spirits. Shit's weird. Well, when my mother was pregnant, she had a dream about a boy. In the dream, she was holding a little boy with blue eyes and really curly hair. She believed that this is what I would look like. I had wavy hair and hazel eyes. Well, years later, I must have been 15 at the time. I was playing video games on my Xbox. We had a projector, and whenever the Xbox was off, the projector would go on a solid blue screen and search for an input. Well, I just turned off the Xbox, and all of a sudden the shadow of curly hair rose on the blue. It was as if somebody had stood up, and their hair blocked some of the projector. The problem was that I was sitting on a chair directly below the projector. Weirdly, I wasn't afraid. Well, 3 years later it's Christmas. My whole family were sharing their experiences. As it turns out, my brother saw the kid in a dream too. Sorry, it's not very distressing. I do have another though. At the time, my mom and dad and brother were outside fixing a pipe. While they're working on this pipe, I'm typing out a report. For some reason, all the lights in the house are off, including the room that I'm in. All of a sudden, I get a chill. I turn toward the doorway in the room. I see a sock slowly start to move from the other side of the doorframe. The sock looked as though a kid had stuck their hand in it to make a sock puppet. The sock puppet stopped, turned toward me, then slowly creeped out of view. The entire time I was petrified with fear. I don't think I even breathed. That messed me up for a little bit. So I grew up in Brazil, in a suburban area. Oh, by the way, ask credit number 4. So I grew up in Brazil in a suburban area. In my house lived me, my parents, and my younger brother. The house was one of those wooden houses that made creaking sounds when you walked. I was 15, my brother 11 at the time. I would consider myself to have always been attuned to paranormal things. I had seen ghosts when I was very young, had many cases of predicting near future, reading people's minds, and once I swear some form of telepathy. I had a sixth sense. I had most of my life felt lightly uncomfortable about my house. I didn't know why. A heavy aura. And in the months leading to this event, it became much stronger. Nightmares were a little more frequent at night. I felt a constant unease as it became darker. Coincidentally or not, my brother had begun to sleepwalk. It was freaky. My mother had told me, but I hadn't seen it happening till about a week before the event. My mother and I were watching a movie in the living room. My dad had gone to bed, so did my brother. Suddenly I saw by the corner of the eye that my brother had quickly gone from his bedroom to the toilet opposite his room. But he didn't turn on the lights. A few seconds after, my mom went there and walked him back to his bed. He was sleepwalking. From the couch, I could see into my brother's room and half of his bed. A few minutes after he had gone back to bed, suddenly he sits up, really stiff, turned to look in our direction. His eyes were wide open. Not moving, not blinking. I poked my mom and pointed at him. Wasn't afraid. I think, but I was a little spooked. My mother started going in his direction, but he laid down again. That was it for that night. A week passed. I remember even telling my mates at school about how freaky my brother was sleepwalking. I went to bed and the feeling of unease had grown so much that I couldn't sleep myself. My room was next to my brother's. My door was open, and one dimmed light stayed on overnight in the corridor that connects all 3 bedrooms. I couldn't stop looking at my door. I was really alert. Something wasn't right. It was probably near midnight, and I still couldn't sleep. I heard my brother's bed creaking. In my mind, I thought, not again. Somehow I had now this fear that my brother could hurt me while sleepwalking. But the floor was all floorboards, and even being the ninja I was at sneaking quietly out of my bedroom at night to watch TV, I knew that if somebody walked, especially in my brother's room, the floor would make noise. I knew around the whole house where I could and could not step if I wanted to be quiet. It was impossible to get out of my brother's bed without making any noise. In the middle of the night, any tiny sounds felt much louder, and I felt comfort that my brother didn't seem to be getting out of his bed. But the air had gone colder, tense, scary. I pulled my blankets close to my face, and I could just see the door. I couldn't take my eyes off of it for some reason, until a black, transparent smoke, for lack of a better way to describe it, quickly passed by my door, coming from my brother's room toward the living, dining, and kitchen. It covered the whole door for a second. The door was large, larger than most new doors nowadays. I froze. I got so scared and was hoping I could just wake up from this nightmare. First, it was dead silent, but that didn't last long. Heavy stomping began to come from behind the living room. I was a strong teenager, 1.85 meters, which is like 6 feet. And I know even I could not stomp that hard with all my strength. Couldn't believe my parents weren't waking up. It stopped. Not sure if it was to my relief or meaning it was about to do something else. I was scared. It then began alternating between, similar to chains being tossed and dropped. To me, it felt like it kept going for like 15 minutes. I didn't know what to do. Never been that scared in my life. Suddenly, just as it started, it stopped. Seconds later, I see my mother walking past my room, coming from hers, my brother's bedroom toward the kitchen. I hid in my blankets, and she didn't see I was awake. A few minutes later, she returns, with my brother. But my brother never went that way. There was no other way. Only the smoke passed my door. I was 100% sure. Nevertheless, the sight of my mother must have calmed me down. After a while, I managed to fall asleep. Next day. This is in the middle of the week, Thursday, I think. For the first time ever, my uncles, aunties, and grandmother came to my house in the middle of the week. Not even for dinner. They're all talking in the dining room while me and my brother watched TV. I got intrigued considering what happened last night, and I was trying to eavesdrop on them. They were also being unusually quiet. I tried and tried, then I heard it. ... Ghost ... That was it. I had to join that conversation. But as I went towards them, they quickly noticed and clearly changed subject. My mother asked me what did I want. I asked what they were talking about. She tried to brush it off, but I continued with, "Is it about the ghost last night?" They all got caught by surprise. My mom asked me what did I know about it. I told her what I had seen and what I had heard. They were surprised. They didn't know about that. My mother then told me what happened after I saw her that night before. She said she walked into the dining room, into the kitchen. All the lights were off. That when she turns the kitchen light on, there's my brother, waking. I believe they mean walking. Trying to walk toward the kitchen sink, with one drawer open and many knives on the bench, one in his hand. His eyes were open wide and he didn't respond. She approached him, took the knives away, gave him a hug, gently pulled him towards a chair where she sit him and just put him on her lap. She attempted to talk to him with no success, then guided him back to his bedroom. He lay down quietly and slept. She went back to her bed and fell asleep. But my mother looks at me and says, that wasn't all that happened that night. After she went back to sleep later, both my parents woke up suddenly in the middle of the night. Their door was half open, and both of them say they see a large black smoke enter their room and move next to their bed. My mother says she became mute. She couldn't speak. She tried to scream, but nothing. Her arms and legs, however, were swinging at it, trying to push it away to no success. My father said the opposite happened to him. He was paralyzed, his body stuck to the bed, but he never screamed so loud in his life. That smoke hovered over the bed for a few moments, and then just left the room. Within a few seconds, my father said he could now move. He jumped from the bed to check on me and my brother, and we were both sleeping. He said he checked all the windows and all the doors, and all were locked. He went back to the bed, but they couldn't sleep again that night. This is why my family had come to my house. My parents were scared. My grandmother had brought holy water to bless the house. I think it was pointless, honestly. The reason I didn't say anything before was because after that night, the same morning the heavy aura I used to feel in the house was gone. My brother never slipped or sleepwalked again. It was as if something was building up and then went off with a blast, with all of its energy used in that last event. We lived in that house for another 3 years before moving overseas. During that time, I had some minor sixth sense type of situations, but nothing like that ever happened again. Hope you guys enjoyed those stories this evening, or afternoon, or morning, or whatever time you may be hearing this. I appreciate you guys, and it was always a pleasure, and see you later. Hopefully tomorrow.